Good morning. Today is Thursday, November 21st, 2024. It's approximately 10:03 a.m. This is convening of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. I'm Jordan Maynard. I'm serving as chair. We're holding this meeting virtually, so we will do a roll call. Good morning, Commissioner O'Brien.
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning, Commissioner Hill.
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning, Commissioner Skinner.
Good morning.
And good morning, Commissioner Broder.
Good morning, Chair. I am here.
Sounds good. All right, this is public meeting number 540. We will turn to Secretary Skinner to present a few sets of minutes.
All right. I move that the commission approve the minutes from the January 5th, 2023, the October 24th, 2023, and the October 25th, 2023 meetings that are included in our packet, subject to any necessary corrections for typographical errors or other non-material matters.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner.
Aye.
Commissioner Broder.
Abstain?
And I vote yes for one abstention. All right. For our next item on the agenda, we're going to turn to Executive Director Dean Serpa for an administrative update. Good morning, Dean.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, and good morning, Commissioners. Yes, for today's administrative update, it actually involves the continued discussion of the Commission's strategy for a sports betting wager limitations issue. If you remember, in our last discussion on the topic, the Commission had asked staff to develop some initial options for the Commission to consider on how to best begin an informed and reasonable approach to managing the issue. So the team did meet a number of times with members of our legal and sports wagering and communications divisions. And we have a few initial sets of considerations for you to consider as a group and give us some feedback on how you'd like us to move on next. And so to learn more about those options that we put together, I'll turn it over to Carrie Teresi, Chief of our Sports Wagering Division, to give you some details and recommendations and to get your feedback. So Carrie, if you're ready, I'll turn it over to you right now.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. So as Executive Director Serpa said, the Sports Wagering, Legal, and Communications Divisions are here to provide you with a recommendation as to next steps in the Commission's discussion and review of wager limitations. Of course, the Commission has been discussing this topic since last spring and has received quite a bit of information from both operators and industry experts. At this stage, we would recommend circulating a detailed but narrow data request to the operators, which we would formulate to seek specific data points regarding patrons, their limits, and their betting behavior. We would draft that data request in such a way that a review and analysis of the data would presumably show us the volume of patrons being limited and whether and to what extent a correlation exists between one, a patron whose limits have been decreased and who exhibits winning behavior, and two, a patron whose limits have been increased and who exhibits losing behavior. We would anticipate getting a data request out in the coming weeks, and following receipt of submissions, we would review that data, determine if additional data requests or clarifications are necessary, and identify possible action for the Commission. We would then return to the Commission with an update and possibly propose regulations. Such regulations might include things like requiring notifications to patrons who have been limited, implementing reporting or audit requirements regarding patron limits, or requiring clear and defined protocols and parameters around patron limits. So if the Commission is amenable to this plan, we can move forward with circulating that data request to begin sort of the first step in this process. And I believe, are all here from each division if you have any questions on this.
Commissioners, thank you, Carrie. Commissioners, any questions, comments on the plan? Commissioner Hill.
No questions. I think this is appropriate. Move forward. So I have no issues having the staff do just that.
Yeah, I agree. The briefing was helpful to me. I think it's the right way to go.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Brien. I'm getting a thumbs up from Commissioner Broder, Commissioner Skinner. We're going to be curious here, and I look forward to what we learn. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
All right. Anything else, Executive Director Serpa?
Nope, that's it for this morning, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With that, we are going to turn to item number 4, and we are excited to introduce Director Mark Vanderlinden. I see Marlene Warner and I see Joe on too. With that, Director Vanderlinden, can you kick us off and make all the necessary introductions?
It'd be my pleasure. Thank you, Chair Jordan Maynard and commissioners. Yeah, we're happy to release a study today, the feasibility of prospective sports wagering kiosks in Massachusetts. This has been a study that's been in the works for quite some time. So again, we're to release this to you and prepare it for the legislature. So as way of background, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 23 and Section 20, the regulation of sports wagering in Massachusetts requires the Gaming Commission to conduct a study into the feasibility of allowing retail locations in the Commonwealth to operating sports wagering kiosks. The legislation noted that the study should address the feasibility and the potential economic, public safety, and public health impacts of such a decision. So in this requirement, the Gaming Commission contracted with Spectrum Gaming Group in collaboration with the Massachusetts Council on Gaming and Health to conduct the study. The purpose of this feasibility study is to provide the MGC with information that we can then provide to the legislature for use and consideration of the implementation of sports wagering, retail location sports wagering kiosks. So with that, I'm happy to introduce our folks that will be presenting from Spectrum and from the Mass Council. We have Joe Weinert, who is the Executive Vice President of Spectrum Gaming Group. We have Matt Pera, who is a Senior Sports Betting and iGaming Advisor, and Marlene Warner, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Massachusetts Council on Gaming and Health. I believe, Joe, you are going to be kicking this presentation off, and please feel free to expand on your background and introduction if you wish, but I am turning it over to you now. So thank you.
Good morning, Commissioner Maynard and members of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. As Mark said, I'm Joe Weinert, coming to you from southern New Jersey, just across the bay from Atlantic City, joined by Matt Pera, who's coming to you from South Florida, and Marlene Warner, someone I think you all know, coming to you from Salem. Just a quick background about Spectrum Gaming Group. Despite our middle name, we are not a proponent of gaming, nor are we an opponent of gaming. We simply specialize in the economics, public policy, and regulation of legal gambling worldwide. And as some of you may know, we do have quite a history with the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. Spectrum played a predominant role in the formative years of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. We wrote the strategic plan. We did half of the due diligence licensing investigations for the casino applicants. We did a study about absorbing the State Racing Commission, and we're just generally there to help consult with the commission along the way. With this study here, this was interesting because this was something new to us as well. And when I first heard about it, as I'm a native New Hampshirean and I still have a lot of family there, so on my many visits to there over the past few decades, I've come to know the lay of the land in Massachusetts quite well. When I first heard about this, I thought, oh, this is something that might be a real benefit to the, to local establishments in Massachusetts. So we do have a presentation that I'd like to do. Can I share the screen here?
Yes, you should be able to share.
All right, let me do that here. Pardon me. Excuse me. Pardon me. Frog in my throat here.
Joe, I've had the same problem for about 2 weeks.
Hmm.
So we understand it's going around, especially in the Northeast.
Excuse me. We were, what's that? We were asked to disclose our past clients. And here you can see a list of, pardon me. I apologize for this. You can see our list of clients over the past 4 years. And importantly about Spectrum, we don't have.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman? Let's take a 5-minute break.
Yeah, let's take a break. Let Joe get.
Yep.
Together. Yeah, that,
I feel his pain because it's been me the last 2 days.
Yeah.
I've been there too. So
it's been going around. Yeah, we've got it. So yeah, let's.
All right, I'm good now. I'm good.
All right.
Are you certain?
I'm fine, thank you. Importantly about Spectrum is that we don't have ongoing clients. We provide a service for a fee, and we do that independently. And here are the clients from the Massachusetts Council on Gaming and Health. And like I said, when I first looked at this, I thought, again, this might be a benefit for the small businesses in Massachusetts. But as we got into this, we found it would not be. And simply, we found that while we don't think this would be necessarily a bad idea, we just don't think it would be a good idea. We cannot rationalize the Commonwealth of Massachusetts doing this. Essentially, the revenues aren't there, the economic benefit is not there, yet the risk of increased social impacts and public harm is increased, and the regulatory burden is increased. And I think what one of the key points, the key point here is, we look, 3 states have sports wagering kiosks. We looked at them: Montana, Ohio, and Washington, D.C. And Ohio is most similar to Massachusetts. And if you look here, the percentage of win from the kiosk doesn't even show up on this pie chart. You'd need about an 80-inch high definition television zoomed in at about 500% to see the sliver of the pie that is generated by the sports wagering kiosks. And Ohio is similar to Massachusetts in that it has casinos in the state, and it also has the online gaming. And I think if you look at that third check mark there, that's the key one there. The average revenue for the kiosks themselves, the amount they kept for 2023 was $225. And I think what an important point too is that in Ohio, digital casino, and when I say digital, I mean online gaming or online betting, digital kiosk and sports wagering were all launched at the same time. In Massachusetts, that would not be the case. The casino, sports books, and the digital wagering in Massachusetts both had a big head start over the kiosks. And when we look at this, we found that kiosk wagering in the United States, there's not a whole lot known about it right now. It's young. We could find no specific research on this channel of wagering. And frankly, whether you go to industry conferences or you talk to industry providers, it just doesn't move the needle in terms of the conversation. It's a very small segment of the sports betting industry and an even smaller segment of the overall gambling industry. It just doesn't have the attention that other forms of wagering have. Again, looking at Montana, Ohio, and DC, Ohio is most like Massachusetts. Montana is interesting because you have to go to a kiosk host to make your wager, but you can do that online. once you're on site. So you can go there and you can play the kiosk, or you can just take out your mobile phone and make the wager right there. So that's called on-site mobile. DC had a what is largely seen as a very poor rollout of its sports wagering. It has since improved since our study was completed, and they don't break out their kiosk wagering results from the online, but it has improved, and I think the improved online offer they're offering in DC most likely will have come at the expense of some of the kiosk revenues there. Interestingly, and I think a big part that informed our study was we interviewed 20 kiosk hosts in Montana, Ohio, and DC, and we saw a cross sampling of types of kiosk hosts and in different geographies. And the general consensus was, yeah, they're okay. You know, we don't necessarily love them, but they're okay. It gives our customers something else to do. Of course, in Montana, they have to have the kiosks to offer sports betting. The disadvantages was they're not getting much revenue and they take up space. And with that, I'll turn it over to Marlene to talk about the social, community, and public health impact of prospective kiosk wagering in Massachusetts.
Thanks, Joe. Good morning, everyone. This was really actually also fascinating for us. We wanted to take a look at the literature, and as Joe said, we saw next to nothing as it relates to social impacts directly with kiosks, but just looking at exposure on a community level to groups that are vulnerable was something that we did. So we included a literature review in the report. We also did a survey of Massachusetts residents to get assess like, what did people think? Was this on their radar? Did they want more access? And then had individual one-on-one conversations, qualitative interviews with individuals in Massachusetts as it related to that. In Massachusetts and outside of Massachusetts, I should say, including some of the folks in Ohio, Montana, and Washington, D.C. Overall, no one really thought in terms of the public health aspects that this was a good idea. There was a lot of limitations, and we'll kind of talk about that as we go through these slides. That in general, youth and folks in recovery, this was just broadening their access with little to no oversight with these kiosks. The impact on small businesses, Joe just kind of talked about. And I know this is kind of where it came from in terms of Massachusetts, but the idea that it might help small businesses, it may help businesses in communities of color. Overall, we weren't seeing that in the conversations we had. Next slide. So, sorry, back to the youth slide. One more back. Sorry, go ahead. Next one. All right, stop. Oh, one back. Right there, sorry. So overall, we did talk about too little, too late. Like if this had been rolled out simultaneously with the mobile apps, they thought maybe that there was an opportunity, but given the numbers that we are seeing in the other states, and not just states with kiosks, but every other state that has mobile, we know that somewhere between 97 to 99% of the sports bets are coming over a mobile. It would be hard to think about putting a kiosk in and actually having some impact. So folks felt like, there was limited enthusiasm about this expansion. They just had pretty low expectations. The one caveat I want to say is that there was a coalition, a trade association related to minority-owned businesses here in the Commonwealth that wanted to say that they were still interested in exploring this. They felt like there was something around social equity in terms of planning and implementing kiosks to think about this. And they were also saying, though, that they would be interested in future forms of gambling if the legislature ever expanded anything else, them being considered there because they understood what these other findings were. But in general, we're still interested in the concept of kiosks, even if it was minimal money, just to draw in new customers, because they felt like, in general, communities of color, businesses owned by people of color have been left out of the gaming industry, was the overall sentiment. Next slide. So youth, I think similar to any other, other states have access in some ways to gambling that's a little bit more open and easier to just walk up to. And I think in general, that is a problem. And again, talking to the folks in Ohio and Washington, D.C., less in Montana because of the setup that Joe described. It's like the terminals for lottery. I mean, technically there's a controller you could turn off, or there's a way to kind of section it off, but it's hard to maintain, it's hard to manage, and it's not what the retailers are set up for. They don't have the infrastructure. So I think that was one of the concerns. The other concerns are around if these are in bars, restaurants, convenience stores, those are places that kids are easily able to go into, never mind once they're accessing it and seeing it and being lured in, but just that they're kind of the omnipresence of it. And then I think in general, it would normalize gambling behavior even further if they're present everywhere. The other concern was the anonymity of the machines, the ease of payment, and the visual stimuli. So again, kids getting hooked by just watching what is on the screen. So those are all concerns that were brought up around youth as a vulnerable population. Next slide. And then finally, through these interviews that I spoke to, again, folks were generally pretty negative on the concept, didn't think it was needed, didn't think Massachusetts makes enough money related to gambling, didn't want to have to go down that road in terms of the public health impacts. And I think in general, as we've seen with Dr. Wolberg and some of the reports related to sports wagering from the Sigma study is, we already know sports wagering has some uniquely negative impacts on players. And so the idea that we would increase access to that, folks weren't terribly interested in that. And then, like I already talked about, the player activated terminals that the lottery already uses, they feel like are problematic and don't want to replicate that through kiosks. So in general, it was not warmly received by the public health folks that we spoke with.
All right, thank you, Marlene. And then now we turn over to Matt Para. And one of the things that we did was, even though we concluded that from an economic perspective that this was really not a feasible project, we did look at, okay, what if the Commonwealth did want to implement this? And so Matt took the lead in looking at some of the aspects involved with potential implementation of this form of gaming. Matt?
Thank you, everyone. So as Joe said, the only comparable markets here were Montana, Ohio, and Washington, D.C. As kiosk betting is young, and it's not very common to see states opt for kiosk betting when they do legalize sports betting. It's normally technical business casinos, which allows for a lot easier management of compliance and other considerations. So what we did is we lined everybody up and we did a compare and contrast. And as you'll see, most of this is pretty in line. You can tell from Washington, D.C., the cost is more associated with the lack of, I think, qualified locations or locations that could be viable. But you'll just see that Montana is obviously the easiest, just due to the fact that they do not have online gaming or normal casino-based resort gaming. It's more VFWs and those types of locations. So as far as the costs and the maximum bets and the exposures that a lot of these places would end up taking is relatively in line. We think that they are comparable to lottery redemptions as well. So we think it from that perspective, as far as managing risk and the financial risk that the retailer would have, we think they're already taking that today with lottery sales. And then as far as age restriction goes, this is in line with lottery sales in all except Ohio. So when we looked at the eligibility of the retailers, we needed to benchmark against something that the state is already familiar with and already enforces today. And so it became very obvious that we wanted to look at the existing lottery providers and measured them in the same standards that they'd be measured for lottery sales, except we actually added the caveats that come with sports betting. Sports betting is a lot more complicated than lottery. There are different types of settlement events. It's not black and white like it is with lottery tickets, you either win or lose. In sports betting, you have different types of wagering results. You can have a push where they get their money back. You can have a 5-leg parlay that has a push and reduces down to 4, and the payout is different. The clerks, the people that are doing redemptions actually have to be a little bit more educated to the product. And so we started looking at these aspects and applying it to whether or not these hosts are actually eligible or set up for something like this. And in addition, the cash handling capabilities, it's a lot different. We would expect a lot more volumes with sports because it's an event-based gaming product versus lottery, which is much more routine in nature. And so you can have surges in wagering events, say the Super Bowl, where one lottery retailer could get hosed. He could be sitting with all these redemptions from 1,000 players, if he chose to. Otherwise, he'd have to turn them away and they'd have to mail in. And then what's the point of having this convenience, right? And then we also looked at their ability to generate sales. Again, you need volumes in sports wagering. It's not like lottery. We need a volume because you can win. You can't force a team to win or lose. And therefore, you need to have a lot of volumes to even out, to avoid exposure being lopsided and the volatility that comes with low sales. This is just a fact. If you sell a winning ticket to a player that wins $1,000, but everybody else that made bets, you had 5 guys make bets for $10 on the other side. You just can't make any money in that sense, in that type of volume. So you really want to focus on locations that do volumes. Sports, not all lottery kiosks are going to be good hosts. This is just a fact. Based on their location, they wouldn't get the foot traffic that's relevant to sports betting. They don't have the space in their locations to actually, present the product in a meaningful way that you could generate sales, or police and keep compliance over the product. This is another thing. Putting a kiosk behind a shelf where no one can see it, and someone stuffing bills in there to make a bet that they know is a sure thing, just so they can wash that money and cash it out the next day for the cash, is that's something no one's going to watch in some of these settings. It's not reasonable to expect. But again, the ones that we do believe are eligible and that could actually have some level of success is, the sports bars, the high traffic, the Buffalo Wild Wings, the places where you're having social interaction and that you can curate that interaction with the game that's on, the local team, and really, try to do cross promote, make $100 parlay, get a free pitcher of beer, something along those to promote sales. That's who we think is most eligible and from a success perspective, we think. So when we interviewed members of MGC's IEB, and obviously they're suited. They have all the tools they need to police these. However, when you look at what they're doing today in the scope of policing the racetracks and the casinos that have sports betting, you're saying you're going to times that by 100, because now every kiosk location is essentially a casino to an extent that they perform cash handling events that are involved with gaming products. This has to be monitored and audited. And so by applying the existing procedures that are in place that are working today and making kiosk operators conform to those, that would be our suggestion. However, the reality of some of these kiosk operators being able to actually conform and meet those expectations, we think is very low. It's a complicated process to be compliant. And so based on their current workload and the amount of kiosks we would see in the field, we would say that there would be a substantial expansion in force. And obviously it's dependent on the number of applicants that come forth and want a kiosk. It depends on the number of kiosks that are distributed in each location and in the aggregate. And then how do you enforce the administrative rules and audits? This would be a daily, continuous effort, I would say, for a team to constantly go through every single kiosk operator to do their audits. And it's an ongoing-ish thing that has to be done continuously. And then So finally, what we concluded is that there would be a substantial increase in force for MGC resources to be able to do this responsibly and conform with current regulations and practices that they do today. Furthermore, to these costs, so when we look at it from a financial perspective to the state and the lottery itself, when the Ohio Lottery made this public, that their startup costs were $335,000 to get everyone up and going, but the staff they brought on cost $650, and the revenue made was $305. So they ran at a deficit essentially of $680 in their first year of operation. But beyond the licensing, they say that there's no real, there's not very much else to do. From a crime perspective, so this one we got we're very detailed on. As Joe said, the kiosks is a newer subject. It's very new since 2018. So there's not a lot of studies on this. So what we did was we equated it to any other machine that handles cash transactions in an anonymous way. And so we basically identified the following risks, most prevalent risks, which would be money laundering, albeit in small amounts, but you start smurfing around with the network, and this is very achievable. You have underage gambling. Obviously, a lot of these kiosk hosts have minors foot trap. And even if it's a sports bar, there are minors that can go in and eat, and you have minors in convenience stores. And so, yes, underage gambling is obviously a very big thing here. And sports is obviously, young people are trained to be interested in sports. So this is obviously a real threat. And then you have employee and vendor theft. So by this, we identified certain examples of, because sports betting settlements are not black and white, they do have to be interpreted. And it can be what a system tells you, which is what it would be. But when you have to explain that to a player, that the payout is different than what's on his ticket, and the reason why, this opens up the door for certain types of, people can be taken advantage of if they don't know what they're talking about, or the clerk behind the desk can check this complicated part and say it's a loser. A lot of people go with their lottery tickets. They just scan them, hand them over. Person tells them whether or not it was a winner. This would happen we see the same thing happening with these bet slips, where an employee could easily just say, yeah, it's a loser, not scan it, keep it for later and cash it in, just like any other lottery type scenario. And then again, anytime you introduce more points of gaming in cash transactions, you're going to have higher risk for retailers and patron safety. This could be, someone cashing out a bet slip at a retailer and walking out and being robbed in the park. Same with lottery tickets and scratch tickets that get redeemed. This would just happen. You'd have more volume because you have more bets being redeemed, and so the likelihood of this increases. So again, higher chance of patron theft. We have increased risk of money laundering. You can use short odds to wager on this. It's like I said, you bet on sure things. You're paying the juice to wash your money, essentially. And it's done in small levels, and it has to be very sophisticated, but it can be done. It's a risk nonetheless. And so again, you're increasing the number of facilities, which is going to increase your risk. And combining sports and lottery, we saw into a single kiosk could actually reduce your risk because it's one less piece of hardware out there that's storing cash. But again, it's more gambling nonetheless. So again, we combined crime, security, eligibility considerations, and again, as we stated before, a lot of lottery retailers they do not staff for this type of compliance enforcement. The requirement to be staffed to sell lottery tickets is likely extremely different than what it would be required in a retail sports betting setting. And therefore, to expect some of these employees at these locations to realize or detect money laundering or suspicious behavior, again, we don't believe that this would be realistic. We think that there are higher volumes and higher values of redemptions. Also, these are a lot more than lottery. Lottery is running at a a much higher hold rate than sports betting does. And therefore sports bettors win more often. So you're going to have more redeemed tickets. You're going to have them for higher amounts because sports betting wagers are typically larger than your typical lottery purchase, unless you're doing them in aggregate, a bunch of them. And therefore, we think you're just increasing the actual denominations and the values of these cash transactions versus what you see today with normal lottery redemptions. And then finally, you have the security and surveillance capabilities. These guys, again, there will be cameras set up, I'm sure. There is a certain amount of required compliance that's followed today just to sell lottery tickets. But when we look at the intricacies and complexities of sports betting and compare them to what the standards are today, we didn't believe it was realistic to apply the same standards. There had to be more rigid enforcement there and expectations. So from a black market perspective, we look at would the kiosks actually take away from the black market? And right now, with the introduction of mobile wagerings for the last 25 years, kiosk betting is just not going to take anybody away from the black market. Kiosk betting is very much a social interaction. It's done in a setting where you expect to stay and settle the wager. It's an event. It's very intentional. It's not for convenience. It's not for because of a better experience or anything like that. And so again, we don't believe it's going to dent anything in the black market. And if you compare the offering of what we would recommend you offer in this type of setting, which is going to be fairly limited to avoid exposure and losing months for the state if they were to operate it, we compare it to what the black market offers today, and you cannot compete from a product perspective. It would actually be dangerous for the state to do so, to try to serve some of these markets. And so again, you look at the maxes that kiosk providers can offer on wins versus what the black market will allow you to do, and bet with crypto, by the way. We just don't see any take up on kiosk betting from the black market.
All right, thank you, Matt. We also looked at the potential impact on the mass lottery, which I know is a real revered institution in Massachusetts and an important revenue source. We found no studies looking specifically at the impacts of kiosks on lottery revenues, but looking at the performance of the Massachusetts lottery, we have not seen any impact from sports wagering on lottery revenues, overall sports wagering. And because it's a different type of activity, as Matt was just explaining, with different types of players. And certainly kiosk wagering, because it's so small, we would expect that to have no impact. That said, kiosks and Keno would likely be offered in the same locations. And so if this were implemented in Massachusetts, it would bear watching to see if Keno revenues were impacted. And lastly, this was a little bit of a one-off in the RFP that was to look at, has sports betting in Massachusetts, how has it affected establishments that serve alcohol? So we interviewed 20 sports bar and restaurant host interviews, and basically they said no. They said they see people getting out their phones a little more often than they used to check their bets. That's created a little bit more excitement, but overall sports wagering has not impacted their business. And some of them said that we would be supportive of adding kiosks should they be offered. And as you can see from the pie chart there, again, it's all about the digital game now. In Massachusetts, for the last 12-month period ending in March, almost 99% of sports wagering revenues were done via digital channels. So that concludes our presentation. I thank everybody for suffering my vocal episode there. But Matt, Marlene, and I are available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you all. We'll turn to the commissioners. I see Commissioner Hill looks like he's ready.
Well, I don't have any questions. I want to say it was a very good report as usual. I'm not surprised by what has come out of the report. We have been hearing, what's been going on in terms of people using their phones to place this bet. I think the last comment that was made is everybody should take away from this. 99% of all the bets are done on a phone. I mean, a kiosk would just not make it for these restaurants who initially, and I was one of them, by the way, would have thought that this would have been very helpful to the restaurant industry. But now that we see that it's all being done on the phone, we can see that it really isn't the panacea that some thought it might be. So with that said, the information that you gave us is very helpful moving forward. And I think it also is going to help us when we start looking at possibly allowing VFWs, and it wouldn't be us, by the way, it would be the legislature that would allow that to happen. You know, allowing VFWs to possibly have these kiosks, you know, to try and make money, that it just isn't the money maker that people think that it is. I was surprised as we have evolved over the last year and a half with sports wagering at how much goes into the phone and not a kiosk. We were at PPC recently, and you know, we're looking at people right there using their phones over their kiosk. I mean, it was something to watch, you know, physically up close and personal. So this is great information. Marlene, as always, you know, I appreciate your point of view in this when it comes to our youth. And, you know, it makes me think even more so that I would be concerned putting a kiosk in because there aren't the safeguards put into these restaurants that would be in other places that would be 21 and older only. So that information, it was very good for us to have. So a great report by all of you, and not a surprise, but now that we have it in print, you know, I'm thankful for the information.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Hill. And interestingly, as we said, I think the results in Ohio are particularly telling. And our study, as Mark explained early on, you know, this has been going on for some time now. Our study went through calendar year 2023, and looking at the 2024 results in Ohio, they're worsening. So it's not an upward trend by any means.
No, it is not. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill. Commissioner O'Brien.
So just echoing what Commissioner Hill said, and then further to the point they made about the cost of compliance and monitoring is, in addition to, you know, the body power that would have to go out, there's a tremendous amount of technological monitoring that goes on. And this speaks to what Commissioner Hill said about, you know, even the specter of slots going in to VFW halls, that's a whole other cost on top of what was already flagged in the report that just adds another bit of weight in the opposite direction in terms of these just don't make sense financially. The cost of monitoring them would be prohibitive. So it's consistent with what I was expecting. And I thank you guys for the time to put in the entire perspective.
Thank you.
One thing I want to just add, if it's okay, is that it was fascinating talking to the folks in charge of responsible and problem gambling in Ohio, because they were quite concerned about the kiosks because they did not have the money to connect the kiosk to their voluntary self-exclusion programs, to Commissioner O'Brien's point, because they're not generating enough revenue to be able to maintain it. So they were quite concerned about it.
It's a good point, Marlene. Commissioners, anything else to add? I'll just say I want to thank the legislature and the governor for having the foresight to direct the MGC to study this issue instead of just moving it forward, right? So I do appreciate that and the work they did on that. And by the way, Joe, I dug up those old studies. I had our team here pull them from the archives, and actually one's sitting right here, and they're really thick. So Spectrum's done a lot of work with the commission over there.
We have.
All right. With that said, commissioners, can we move on to the next topic, which I think we're going to stick with Director Vanderlinden.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Marlene.
Thank you, Joe, Matt, and Marlene. Yes, you will stick with me. So thank you for your patience. And I'm going to provide an update for you on Section 97, the Player Data Project. So Section 97, Chapter 194, Acts of 2011 requires gaming licensees to supply the MGC with data collected from casino player loyalty programs. And in turn, the MGC is required to contract with a research entity to anonymize that data and make it available for qualified researchers. So at the commission meeting on September 26th of this year, I provided you with an update on the status of this project. And at that time, I said it was anticipated that we would be selecting a partner or partners for the player data anonymization, linkage, and storage. And that should be finalized and announced by December 1st of 2024. As a follow-up to that update in September, we're pleased to report that the MGC team intends to enter into an interdepartmental service agreement, or ISA, with the University of Massachusetts Donahue Institute to work with ID Pair and the UMass Data Science and Software Engineering Corps for this project, pending final data security evaluations by the MGC staff. We believe that the University of Massachusetts Donahue Institute's position as a research institution within the Commonwealth with extensive experience in conducting gaming-related research in the Commonwealth, along with ID Pair's extensive experience both with anonymizing gaming data and working with stakeholders in the gaming industry to achieve similar goals, and the UMass Data Science and Software Engineering Corps' experience in using data science to facilitate research. This combined would provide a best value and optimally position the MGC to achieve our goals with this initiative. So that's just a brief update. As I said, our intention is to move forward, but we are certainly open and always receptive to commission feedback and direction on this item.
Thank you, Mark. Commissioners? Commissioner O'Brien?
I just wanted to say thank you to Mark and his team. I know that this has been a project that has been years in the making. I know you've had setbacks when you thought you were on the cusp of doing this. And thank you for your perseverance in this and getting this done. And I know there was, decisions made early on about making sure that all the casinos were up and running before you started doing this. I think that was a wise decision. And again, I know you've had some, starts and stops, and hats off to you guys for persisting with this and everything that you're doing. I'm glad that you're at this point.
Thank you for that acknowledgement, Commissioner O'Brien. This certainly has been a challenging project, but both Dr. Andrews and I know well the value of what this data and the potential of what this data is, and we are beyond enthusiastic to see it come to fruition.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Brien. Anything further? All right, Mark, you have the support of the commission.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you. All right, with that, commissioners, thank you, Dr. Andrews, too. We are going to turn it to CFAO Lennon. Derek, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm joined by Executive Director Serpa, and we're here to present, as well as John Scully, and we are here to present to you options for the Commission's fiscal year 2025 cost of living adjustments. As a reminder, in fiscal year 2024, the Commission approved COLAs for our employees consistent with the executive branch. We try to remain at the very least consistent with what the executive branch is doing with their non-union employees. In June of this calendar year, you all approved an FY25 budget that contained funding for 3% COLAs. The Commonwealth Human Resources Division has announced its plan for FY25 COLAs. The details of HRD's proposal start on page 170 of the packet, which is where the memo starts as well. Those details also continue on to page 171. For reference, HRD has proposed a COLA for FY26 also in there, and I could put that in the packet. But since the Commission has not begun or completed a FY26 budget yet, we have just included that information as an FYI, and I'm not looking for a decision on that at this point. The executive branch is proposing that non-union or unclassified employees receive a 3% COLA effective January 12th, 2025. To be eligible for the COLA, employees must be in non-union or unclassified position as of December 31st, 2024. Employees that the executive branch is saying are not eligible for the COLA are any employees hired into non-union positions after January 1, 2025, employees promoted from a union position into a non-union position who already received a collective bargaining increase in this current fiscal year, non-union staff and terminated with pay status as of January 12th, 2025. And finally, post-retirees are not eligible for the COLA under HRD's plan. If we were to follow HRD's plan, we'd only utilize approximately 1/2 of our budget for COLAs for fiscal year 2025. The tables on page 171 of the memo demonstrate that if we were to follow HRD's plan, that we would leave approximately 215,000, I think it is. I'm sorry, let me pull up the memo. 215,000 of our COLA budget unutilized. The reason for this is that COLAs would be implemented at the midpoint of the fiscal year without any retroactive pay. Page 172 of the packet lays out 3 options for the commission to consider. These are not the only options available and can be tweaked in many different ways. However, the 3 options that we laid out are: option A would be to just follow HRD's recommendation for FY25 and use half of our COLA budget. Option B would be to implement the 3% COLA, however, make it retroactive to the first full pay period in July of 2025, thus utilizing our entire budget. Option C would be to implement the 3% COLA as of January 12th and allow the executive director to determine how to use the balance of the COLA budget for merit increases. One thing that we would like the commission to consider, as they did in FY24, is to slightly modify the eligibility of HRD's proposal to allow our post-retiree positions to be eligible for the FY25 COLA. At this point, I'll pause for any questions. I know that we did have 2x2s on this, so we are anticipating some discussion.
Commissioners, Commissioner O'Brien.
So Derek, and I'm just repeating the conversation I had with Derek, which is I am inclined to follow option C, but I do have a caveat with that. There's 2 reasons for that. One, I do think we're going through performance evaluations. I'd like the executive director and the division directors to have money to put down following that are based on performance. We also have, traditionally, we have a 90-day rule, and Derek, you can describe it for me with more particularity, but basically if you come in and then an adjustment happens within 90 days, you're not going to get that adjustment. It's a probationary period. And so the issue I have with any of these is, I understand that HRD is saying if you're on the books by December 31, you can go into January and you're going to get this COLA. I don't think that's a good idea. There's a probationary period for a reason. And I think if you negotiate coming in at that point, you should be subject to the rule that we always have, which is you got to be here 90 days for something like that to take effect. And so I would ask that my proposal would be C, but also overlaying our traditional 90-day period on top of it.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Brien. Commissioner Hill.
So I'm halfway there with you, Commissioner O'Brien. I am for A with the 90 days.
So, Commissioner Skinner.
This is going to be an interesting discussion today. I'm leaning towards.
I think are 2x2 together, so that's why I think we're both laughing.
I'm leaning towards option B, with the caveat that if you are within the probationary period, you would not be eligible for either retro or, well, retro wouldn't apply, I guess, but you would not be eligible for the increase.
So to be, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So to be clear, Commissioner Skinner, I believe B would allow retroactivity.
Yes.
So you would be for retroactive pay. Okay.
I would. And the reason for that, Commissioner, is the funding is there. We've budgeted for that full, 3% for the full fiscal year. And so I'm comfortable with utilizing the funds for that purpose.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Commissioner-
clarification.
Commissioner Broder.
I would say, to keep it short, B, and I'm not particularly concerned about the 90-day probationary period because I'd like to be informed a little bit about how many people we historically have not kept as within that period. But that would, if I'm understanding the way this gets applied correctly, they would lose out on that essentially for all time, right? It compounds in the negative by them not getting that bump. So I'm not too concerned about the folks within the 90-day period, but I do think, echoing what Commissioner Skinner said, we do have the money. I'm the least exposed to the workforce so far, but what I've seen so far certainly impresses me. And if we have the opportunity by budget to do that, let's do it.
Derek, we're getting a little feedback from your. So I'll go ahead and weigh in now. I think I would prefer B. Couple reasons. One is I think that the merit program is really hard to implement in a way that's fairest to the team. I know we've done it in the past, but there are some complications. So I would be fine with B. I would say I join Commissioner Broder in that, we're still in tough times when it comes to competition amongst the workforce, which I can't believe I'm saying 2.5 years after I said it the first time. And so, I look at the people that we hire here and employ here as value propositions. We do a lot more work and bring in a lot more revenue. I mean, we're a revenue generating agency. So I think, our team is worth it. And so what I would say is, I would say B with kind of as presented in the memo.
Mr. Chairman, I'll add my sentiments relative to the value that this option B would bring to our staff, or this option B as representative of how we value our staff. We need only think back to yesterday's proceeding. We had folks from our legal team dedicating hours upon hours upon hours to ensure that we are prepared and that we can carry out our responsibilities in a responsible way. And so that's just one of many, 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 many examples of how our staff gets utilized, and in some cases overutilized. And I think that we may not always be in the position to provide these increases. And so I'm going to go back to what I started with. The funding is there. And so I'm in favor of utilizing it in the way that's outlined here in option B.
So I hear consensus for option B. Commissioner Skinner, going back to the 90-day, I'm hearing maybe, where are we on the 90 days with you?
Yeah, not that. So I would be aligned with Commissioner O'Brien and I believe Commissioner Hill relative to the 90 days. So I think that would be, if we've got consensus on the option B, I think a good compromise would be to not include the individuals who haven't achieved probationary, who have not completed probationary status, be excluded from that. That would be my offer of compromise, I guess.
I have a question, and I guess it's for Derek and Dean. How many employees, I won't say who, how many employees will be affected by the 90-day rule if we implement it?
I had been asked that earlier and I estimated approximately 5 or 6. We always have some transition going on and we have new employees coming in. So we've had a few IT hires This would not apply to our union positions because that's currently a collective bargaining process. So we do have some significant turnover in the gaming agent division always, but that would not apply here. So I'm estimating between 5 or 6 employees.
All right.
And our workforce is at 140 FTEs right now.
And then that would just add anybody who starts by December 31, right?
Correct.
So, yeah. All right, well, sounds like we got somewhere with this. Was there anything additional, Derek? I mean, we'll take a vote. Obviously, I'll take a motion, but was
There
it?
was that one last piece, the post-retirees. So we do have a substantial, well, I'm not going to say substantial, it's probably closer to 7 or 8 post-retirees who do a lot of good work for us. They're in the civilian investigation team, they're in our HR and payroll office, and we do get quite a good benefit out of this. And as I had laid out in some of the 2x2s, the reason that HRD doesn't allow for is because post-retirees are only allowed to earn the difference between what they were making when they retired and what they would work for us. And the 3% cuts into their hours. Our post-retirees don't watch the clock. They're always available to us and they don't put in for all the hours that they work.
I don't know if that's something we should brag about. Derek.
I'm just saying they're excellent employees. They're great to us. So this is a small amount.
Thank you. We encourage everyone to follow the state law when it comes to employment.
Yes.
The Massachusetts Gaming Commission.
Yes.
I am perfectly fine with extending this to post-retirees because we do have the budget. Commissioners, what are we thinking? I see a yes, yes, yes. Commissioner O'Brien?
Mhm.
All right. So with that, Commissioners, I think we can take, I'm ready for a motion if everyone else is.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I move that the commission adopt the cost of living adjustments for non-union employees and post-retirees that the Commonwealth's Human Resources Division has recommended with the effective date of the first COLA retroactive to July 2024 and authorize the executive director to implement such as included in the commissioner's packet and discussed here today.
I would offer an amendment that it's subject to the long 90-day probationary period restriction.
Thank you. I forgot about that. Commissioner O'Brien, and I accept your amendment.
Okay. And with that, I would second the motion.
All right. Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner.
Aye.
Commissioner Broder.
Yes, aye.
And I vote yes, 5-0.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Chief Lennon, as always. Thank you, John. All right. So with that, commissioners, can I have just a 5-minute break, please? All right. We'll return a few minutes after the 11:13. 11:14. Hey, Connor, I think we can pull the screen down. At least see who's on. Wait a minute, Commissioner Broder. Commissioner Broder. All right, so this is a reconvening of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. We're holding this meeting virtually, so we will do a roll call. Good morning still, Commissioner O'Brien.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner Hill.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner Skinner.
Morning.
Good morning, Commissioner Broder.
Good morning.
All right, we left off with item number 6, and for that we are turning back to the sports wagering division and to the chief of sports wagering, Carrie Teresi, for I think 3 different matters. Good morning, Carrie, again.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. So we will start with an update for you on the rollout of the Commission's seal of approval. On October 10th, the Sports Wagering Division notified all operators that they would be required to place the seal of approval on their platforms by November 8th, and that such seal was required to include a link to the Commission's licensing page on the Commission's website. All operators did so by November 8th. They met the deadline and all currently have the seal live on their platforms with the required link. Following the seal going live on all platforms, our communications division executed its communications plan, and I will turn it over to Division Chief Mills to address that.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, the communications division implemented our communications plan, which included a press release to over 200 media contacts, a blog post on massgaming.com, social posts promoting that blog post, and an update to the sports wagering licensee section of our website to include proactive language regarding the seal and inclusion of the seal itself for reference. Our release was picked up by a number of industry trade publications, which we included in clips last week. Wanted to thank Connor for doing that.
All right.
Thank you.
Commissioners. Commissioner O'Brien.
Just thank you to the team, Mills, Carrie, Andrew, everybody. I'm hoping this is a trend that goes. It'd be great if there was a national seal, right, and a link that you could go to confirm legality of the site. But I do think anything we can do to help consumers know they're in the right place, and also the operators that pay a lot of money for the privilege of operating here legally, to help make sure they're going to the legal avenues. I think every little bit helps. And so I really appreciate all the work that you guys have done to get this off the ground, and to the operators for getting it done in the time that we asked.
Thank you. Commissioners, anything to add? I would add my thanks to Commissioner O'Brien, who I know pushed the commission in this regard, and I know we all worked on it together, but she had the foresight to know that this was a really smart way to move, and I appreciate that, Commissioner O'Brien. And to you, Mills, and to Carrie. All right. What's next?
For these next 2 items, I will turn it over to Compliance and Operations Manager Stefan.
Thanks, Carrie. Good morning, Commissioners. The first item I'll present today, starting on page 173 of your packet, is an event catalog request for the TGL, or Tomorrow's Golf League. This event is being petitioned by BetMGM and has been previously presented to the Commission on 2 occasions, the first on May 9 and then again on June 20. During the June 20 public meeting, questions were raised regarding the security of the data, the potential for data manipulation, and the processes for any manual changes to the data. BetMGM, through the TGL, has since provided responses to those questions, which have been included in the memo in a Q&A format based on the discussion during that June 20 public meeting. And before I get into some of those responses, let me quickly outline the relevant sections in the packet for your reference. The event petition begins on page 176. The wagering approval form, which also includes the integrity policy, begins on page 180. The May 9 memo from our sports wagering division can be found on page 201. The June 20 memo from sports wagering can be found on page 204. And finally, there's a memo from our legal division on page 207. With respect to technology verification and security, the system employs reliable golf technologies that have been validated through thousands of global implementations and golf test shots. The accuracy of these technologies is calibrated weekly and prior to each match. Additionally, a dedicated cybersecurity team for the TGL conducts third-party security assessments of vendors to ensure adherence to those high security standards. The data itself is securely stored in a custom-built repository called ScoreSite, which operates using AWS. External parties have a read-only access, which requires secure credentials, while only authorized internal personnel can modify or access the data. Access to the data and underlying code is tightly controlled through secure privileges, and any changes to that data or code undergo an approval process and are subject to segregation of duties, ensuring no single individual can manipulate the data independently. Since the two public meetings, BetMGM has also confirmed that the two additional jurisdictions have approved the wagering on this league within their respective event catalogs, bringing the total number of jurisdictions that allow this event up to 12. And then lastly, as stated in the previous two memos, the TGL is aware of BetMGM's intentions to petition this league. Furthermore, all TGL players are in good standing with the PGA Tour, which is an already approved golf league in our event catalog. That concludes our review of this petition. Several representatives from the TGL are present at today's meeting to address any further questions you may have regarding data security, integrity, or the event itself. And then additionally, we have Zach Kraus, Trading Compliance Analyst from BetMGM, to help answer any questions from their side. However, after a comprehensive review, including consultations with our legal division, discussions with the TGL and BetMGM, our division confirms that all requirements under 205 CMR 247.03 have been met, and we do recommend this event be approved and be added to the Massachusetts event catalog as a golfing event. Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Commissioners, thank you to our guests, by the way, for joining us.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Commissioner Hill. I was going to say, you and I were kind of the driving force in these questions. I defer to you.
No, by all means.
I'm probably just going to say what you were going to say, which is a thank you to the team and TGL for getting us this information. I know they've made themselves available to us too if we had additional questions. These were answers I needed to make myself comfortable. And so I very much appreciate you giving it to us in terms of making sure that everything is calibrated and that the data is protected and that they have, a separation of duties, et cetera, that in the compliance function. And so I'm satisfied at this point.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Hill.
Ditto. Thank you.
That entire exchange reminded me of the quote, "You can go first," right after me. Commissioner Broder.
Real briefly, I want to echo the comments of the prior speakers, but also let folks know that I've just come aboard, but much like with yesterday's proceeding, had the opportunity to chat with staff a little bit and also to review the materials that have been provided and the tremendous amount of information and clarification that's been made available to us. So I intend to vote on this matter.
Mr. Chairman.
I have one question, Commissioner Hill. Is this platform available to just everyday patrons, or is it just for the professionals? Because I would love to do this.
Well, that's a great question, and we absolutely have aspirations of amateur participation at some point. But for year one, it's strictly with the pros.
All right.
There's a lot of expensive technology that can be damaged by errant shots, so we need to.
I would do a lot of damage then, John. All right. With that, thank you for humoring me, Commissioner Hill.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the commission amend the official catalog of events and wages to add tomorrow's golf league as a golf league as included in the commissioner's packet and discussed here today.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner.
Aye.
Commissioner Broder.
Aye.
And I vote yes, 5-0. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you to the TGL, Eric and John, Austin and David for being here too. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, sticking with BetMGM and beginning on page 210 of your packet, we have a single change to their house rules. This revision is a request from our division to add an additional option for account wagering settings for the customer. Currently, as we understand it, the BetMGM system automatically accepts all wager changes that are more favorable for the patron. This house rule change will now give the customer an option to opt out of the more favorable odd changes, and then we'll have to manually accept any favorable odd changes. This does not affect any odd changes that are less favorable. All odd changes that are less favorable to the user will still have to manually accept, as has been the case since launch. This revision will more closely align with a GLI standard, GLI 33, which we have incorporated into 205 CMR 243. And our division is working closely with BetMGM to identify any additional system changes that might be necessary. But we still do have Zach Kraus from BetMGM in the meeting, and we do recommend this language be approved to more closely align with that standard. Chair.
Thank you. Andrew, commissioners, questions for Mr. Kraus? I don't have any either. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Hill.
I move that the commission approve the updates to BetMGM's house rules as included in the commission's packet and discussed here today.
Second. I think Commissioner Broder got me.
I think Commissioner Broder got you. All right. So Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner.
Aye.
Commissioner Broder.
Yes.
And I vote yes. 5-0. I joined Commissioner Broder on that one.
What's that?
I joined your language on that one on accident. Aye. All right.
Thanks, Zach.
Anything else, Andrew, Carrie, your team?
That's all from sports wagering today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. I think we're going to turn now to legal for a matter that's up. Counselor Grossman, I'll kick it over to you to make the introductions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to everybody. We are here today to talk about a transaction involving Bally's Interactive. I thought I would briefly just set the stage, and then I plan on turning the proceedings over to our Deputy General Counsel, Jenna Hentoff, who will run through some of the particulars. But just by way of background, we were notified of a transaction involving Bally's Interactive, a Category 3 sports wagering operator that we have classified as a transfer of interest. And so today, as we've done a number of times in the past with other transfers of interest, thought it'd be helpful to just introduce the transaction to the commission so you're aware of what the proposal looks like. You're not being asked to approve the transaction today, with one narrow exception. There is a piece of the transaction that we are bringing to you for a vote, and that involves the trust instrument. And the trust is an important part of the process, as Jenna will get into momentarily, but it's historically been helpful for the commission to look at that now in advance of the future hearing that will take place in a couple of months, just so we can make any adjustments to the document in advance of an actual proceeding being commenced. That all being said, we're joined today by a number of representatives from Bally's. They're represented by attorney Bob Ross from Greenberg Traurig, who is here. He has filed a notice of appearance for the record, and we'll let him introduce himself and his team momentarily. But all that being said, unless there are any questions, I thought we would go over to Jenna, and then we can go over to Bob to introduce his group, if that makes sense to everyone. So with that, good morning, Jenna, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. As Todd mentioned, we're here to discuss the proposed transaction that Bally's has brought to our attention. And so I'm just going to kind of give an overview of the review of this transfer of interest process that you can keep in mind as we move forward. The statute at Chapter 23N, Section 6H, does allow for transfers of interest in the sports wagering arena, just like Chapter 23K. But I would note that the statutes are different. The language in Chapter 23K on gaming side is much more expansive than 23N. However, the commission has adopted regulations that largely mirror the casino, the process on the casino side of things. And those regulations are at 205 CMR 229. They supplement the statutory provision and they more fully outline the process that the commission would follow in this instance. In essence, the regulatory process is designed to accomplish two things. One, to ensure that the commission has an opportunity to determine whether the transfer will result in a new qualifier or any new qualifiers. And if so, make sure that they submit to the suitability review process to allow for a full and appropriate investigation to be conducted, with a decision on their suitability to obviously be issued by the commission. The second thing is to determine whether the transfer will result in a change of control over the sports wagering licensee, such that the quality of their operation or any license conditions may be affected. Generally speaking, both the law in the statute and in regulation provides that no licensee can transfer a license or a direct or indirect interest in the license without the majority approval of the commission. And the commission does obviously require, again, that anyone or any entity with an interest in the sports wagering license must be qualified for licensure and be found suitable pursuant to the criteria that's outlined in Chapter 23N and 205 CMR. As I just noted, one matter for review by the commission would be whether or not the proposed transaction results in a change of control. And if there is a change of control, the transferee must agree to assume all obligations of the licensee. Change of control is defined in the regulations as a transfer of interest which directly or indirectly results in a person obtaining greater than 50% ownership in the interest in the licensee, or which results in or is likely to result in a significant change to the management operations. In this case, the proposed transaction with regard to Bally's would result in a company obtaining greater than 50% ownership in the parent company of the licensee. And whenever there is a contract, such as in this case, which proposes to transfer an interest in the license as opposed to a transfer of publicly traded securities, under circumstances where there is a new qualifier that must be found suitable, the regulation does state that the contract can't specify a closing or settlement date that is earlier than 121 days after the application is completed. And this time period allows for the commission to hold a hearing and render a decision on the interim authorization of this proposed transferee. I think as Todd did briefly mention, the hearing that would be scheduled would be approximately 3 to 4 months after the application is completed. And that time again does allow for the IEB and the commission to fully investigate and preliminarily review, or I shouldn't say fully investigate and preliminarily rule on the suitability of the transferee via this process. If the commission were to grant interim authorization, the closing or settlement of the transaction may occur prior to a final suitability determination being made. This interim authorization process recognizes that this full investigation does take some time to complete and is designed so that the transaction can close prior to the full investigation, so it doesn't have to be kept in a holding pattern. After interim authorization is granted, the applicant could be ordered to transfer all interest subject to the transfer into a trust if there's reasonable cause to believe that the proposed transferee could be found unsuitable. A fully executed and commission approved trust agreement is required as part of this process. And this trust is a vehicle which is designed to effectuate the clean separation of a transferee that is deemed unsuitable or may potentially be found unsuitable from its interest in the license if that should become necessary. The interest would remain in the trust till a final determination of suitability is made. Though I would note that if a prospective transferee fails or refuses to timely transfer the interest into the trust upon direction from the commission, the transferee would be issued a final negative determination of suitability. The regulation states that it shall occur, the negative determination. And we're going to talk about Bally's trust in just a moment. I should note there are some other considerations just to keep in mind going forward. We'll obviously talk in further detail about this in the future, but basically wanted you to keep in mind that the commission can allow for modifications of the terms, conditions, or agreements that are applicable to the licensee through this process with the transferee, as well as the commission may reject a transfer of interest to an unsuitable person or that, as determined by the commission, would be injurious to the interests of the Commonwealth. The regulations define in what injurious to the Commonwealth means. It includes that the transferee does not satisfy statutory provisions related to licensure and contained in 23N, doesn't satisfy suitability standards as outlined in 205 CMR 215, any other provisions of chapters 23K, 23N, or 205 CMR, or that they don't satisfy provisions regarding change of control with in 205 CMR 22904. So again, today, what you have before you is for review is the proposed trust agreement from Bally's. We would ask you to potentially be approving this today. The draft is provided for you. There is a draft provided for you in your packet. However, we have since that time received a slightly updated version. There were just some edits made to one section of the draft agreement at our request for clarification purposes. So if the commission would like, I can bring that up on the screen. Yes, okay.
Yeah, let's see that if you don't mind.
Of course. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Could you make it just a little bigger for me, please?
Sure.
Made a little bit. Thank you.
Of course. Just to note, the change since the draft that you received is in this paragraph here, paragraph 2A. I'm sorry, 2I. And again, it was for clarification purposes to make sure it read properly. So, again, as noted, this trust agreement is a required part of any proposed transfer of interest, and its required components are outlined in 205 CMR 229.036. It must contain the identity of the proposed trustee, who must be approved by the commission via qualification, as well as the compensation that the trustee will receive. It must contain the manner in which the trust will be transferred, in which the interest will be transferred into the trust in the event that the commission or the IEB directs that the interest be moved. And it must contain how the interest in the trust will be handled upon a final suitability determination, whether that is positive or negative. And lastly, it can also contain any other provisions that the commission deems necessary and desirable. General Counsel Grossman and I have met with Bally's counsel to review this trust agreement. And after our review, it is our opinion that it does meet the requirements of the regulation at 205 CMR 229.036, subject to any further commission review today. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions before Jenna takes this down?
I do have a question. I'm sorry. The change that was made recently or overnight, I guess.
Sorry about that.
You indicated that there was a slight change to this version from the one that's in our packet. I didn't catch the change.
It isn't right. It's in this section here. If you can see it, section 2II. You know, one moment, I can just tell you what the exact change was.
Maybe if you just drag your cursor over this.
Yeah, I just want to bring up the other version just so that I can correctly point it out, of course.
Or just speak to it. I think it would be fine.
Yes, of course. So basically, here it indicates where it says the suitability of the transferee the trustee shall distribute. This language here to the company was added. And it was rewritten so that it was clearly that this all has to have been done within 120 days, everything within the section. Before that, I think in your version, there's like the way it reads, it wasn't quite as clear that everything in this paragraph would have to occur within 120 days of the commission's negative determination. So it was rewritten to clarify that, basically.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jen. I would just point out that section is perhaps the most important provision of the trust. This is the provision that discusses what would happen in the event the commission were to find the transferee unsuitable and the interests were already in the trust. So what this does essentially is just it would send the property back to the company. So we would return to what is the status quo at the moment. It would remove the transferee theoretically from the process. In this case, the transferee is actually part of the company already, as you'll hear about momentarily. So thank you for that, Jenna. Unless there's any other questions with the trust, I think we can probably take this down.
Thank you, Jenna.
So commissioners, before we move into your review of the trust and any potential vote, unless there are any other questions, I turn this over to Attorney Ross to introduce the proposed transaction and go from there. So Mr. Ross, if you are available, I see your camera is off there, but
yeah, for some reason I am not appearing on the camera. It may be a matter of me using the wrong device. Is that better?
Oh, there you go. Yes, we can see you.
Okay, good. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Councilor Grossman, and I'm very excited to be here with the chair and the commissioners. My name is Bob Ross. I work at Greenberg Traurig, and I represent Bally's Corporation in this transaction. I have with me Marcus Glover, who is the Chief Financial Officer of Bally's. I have Craig Eaton, who is the President of Rhode Island Operations and Corporate Secretary. And I have Don Westcott, who's the Global Chief Compliance Officer. And I'm going to give the briefest of introductions and then turn it over to Marcus Glover to give a little discussion of the transaction. And our goal here, really, commissioners, is to familiarize you with this transaction. It is, it's an unusual transaction that we are working with to make sure that that the commission is comfortable with what it will do to the structure of Bally's Corporation. To be clear, it does not affect Bally's Interactive LLC in the slightest bit. With that, I will turn it over to Marcus Glover, the Chief Financial Officer. Marcus, are you on?
We can't hear Marcus.
Okay. Are you muted, Marcus?
There's a caret next to the microphone on the bottom left. And if you hit that, you can get into the system and
can you guys hear me now? Are you guys
Yes.
able to hear me now? Okay. Sorry for the lack of technical dexterity here. Good morning to all of the commissioners, and thank you for having us. As Bob mentioned, I am joined by two of my colleagues, Craig Eaton, Don Westcott, and I wanted to run you briefly through the structural setup for the merger. I would point you, what we put together, and hopefully you have it in front of you, is a fairly simple executive summary level presentation. I would point you, should you want or desire further engagement and just questioning, the proxy has much more detail in it. But to start, just some of the highlights. Bally's Corp and Queen Corp will be combined into one company, with Queen to be a wholly owned subsidiary of Bally's. The Queen's interest is through SQ Gaming LLC, and Standard Rhode Island is for Bally's. We have provided the option, and the vote was on Tuesday, for shareholders who are interested to roll their shares forward, and those who are not, obviously, would get the cash out option. And then post merger, Standard General, no different than today with Bally's in a controlled ownership, would be the majority shareholder of the newly combined company. If you go to slide 3, it gives you an illustration of the corporate structure for both companies, Bally's Corp and Queen Casino. As you can see, there are various Standard General funds that sit at the top. Standard Rhode Island, which I just referenced for Bally's, And then Bally's management, and then obviously we are a publicly traded entity. We have a public float that all have ownership in Bally's Corp today. I won't walk you through. You can see the same illustration on the Queen Casino side. As Bob mentioned, a key point is that while Standard will continue to have interest in both companies, Bally's Interactive will continue to be the licensee for the state of Massachusetts, and nothing will change with that. On the company structure on slide 4, post-merger, it gives you an illustration of the different entities. And the key point I would point to you here is that Bally's Management Group, as well as Bally's Interactive, are not affected by this merger. The last slide points you to the company ownership post-merger, and it shows how the setup will be post-merger, with Standard being the majority shareholder again through Standard Rhode Island and SG or Standard General Casino Queen Gaming LLC. There's obviously through Queen a carryover with some interest from a group called Fortress. And then Bally's will continue. We will still remain a registrant, and the determination on what exchange we will be on is to be decided, whether we remain on New York Stock Exchange or whether we remain on some over-the-counter or other exchange will be determined. But we will remain a registrant. We will be subject to all SEC filings moving forward. And with that, I will pause for any questions.
Any questions? I think we're good.
Okay. Commissioners are there. The presentation is in your packet. It's the diagrams, I think, hopefully sort of clearly illustrate what's happening. Obviously, if there are questions that emerge after this, after this discussion, obviously we stand ready to answer whatever questions you have. I know that Jenna and Todd referenced this as well. We've worked extensively with them as well as the folks on the licensing side, and we've appreciated the collaborative spirit that everyone has come to this transaction with. And I can commit to you that will continue. If any questions arise, please feel free to reach out to me or to anyone with questions about it. We're very grateful for your attention. I know when we spoke with Todd, I guess I should just turn to the trust agreement now, right, Todd?
Yes, I think that's right. If the commissioners are okay with that, we can talk about the trust and review it for potential approval.
Yeah. So I think Todd pointed to the trust agreement's most important provision, which is that Roman numeral 2, the sub 2 within section 2. The language is now quite straightforward. If the trust is triggered because there's a negative determination of suitability, then the interest, which in this case are shares of Bally's Corp, will be returned to Bally's Corp. They will not go to the unsuitable transferee. Are there any questions that I can answer about that? Okay.
I think we're good with what we need.
All right. I'll just close out by saying, our work with the licensing division is continuing. There is time sensitivity to this transaction, as I've repeated to Todd and to other folks as well. I filed a waiver request in October, which is not before the commission for decision today, in light of that time sensitivity. The time sensitivity is that if the transaction does not close by January 21st, this is a transaction set forth in the transaction documents, then a fee starts to be imposed on a daily fee that mounts. And so that's the source of the time sensitivity for January 21, if that can be accomplished. And our goal here and our priority here is to satisfy the commission about the suitability of this transaction and make you comfortable with enabling it to close before January 21, if possible.
Well, thanks, Bob, and Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I think just a couple things just to put this all in perspective. As you mentioned, the matter is with the IEB, and materials have been submitted through the licensing division. Once the application is complete, the clock starts. The IEB has 90 days to produce an interim suitability report. The commission would then have an additional 30 days in which to conduct a hearing relative to interim authorization. So it's a 3 to 4 month process. That's the next step we would be looking at. So just as starters, we'd want to take a look at this trust agreement, make sure the commission is okay with it, so that by the time we reach the interim authorization hearing, the trust agreement has already been buttoned up and ready to go. The trustee is here. His name is Craig Eaton, and it was important that we have someone identified who is of the background that we can be assured that in the event the commission or the IEB directed him, in this case, to do something, that we can trust that they would. So Mr. Eaton is here. He has to go through a background check himself. So that's for starters. And then the rest of the trust instrument, as Jenna already discussed, goes through and includes all the provisions required by our regulations that discuss how the interest would move back and forth if the need arises. So with all that, happy to entertain any questions about it. Otherwise, we would request a vote that this is a satisfactory trust agreement.
Thank you, Councilor Grossman. I'll start off with saying, before I turn to my fellow commissioners, the quicker the IEB gets what they need, the quicker they can turn things around. And we never want to rush suitability because it's important to our process. But, my recommendation to anyone, and this is across the board, dealing with the MGC, is work closely with those teams, and it sounds like you are, and get them what they need. So I'll say that just on the record. And then as to the trust, commissioners, any questions or anything else? I see Commissioner Hill's off his mic.
Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to move forward. Thank you for the presentation, everybody, today. Very informative as usual. Unless there's any questions or comments from my fellow commissioners, I'm ready to make a motion. Mr. Chairman, excuse me, I move that the commission find that the trust agreement submitted by Bally's as included in the commissioner's packet and discussed here today meets the requirements of 205 CMR 229.036.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner.
Aye.
Commissioner Broder.
Yes.
And aye. You're really messing me up, Commissioner Broder. All right, that's 5-0 for the trust agreement.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for your attention. I know we are in close communication with the staff at the Gaming Commission, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you, Councilor Ross, and thank you to those who joined us today from Bally's, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With that, commissioners, item number 8 and item number 9 our executive session, potentially we're going into executive sessions. So what I would do is, if you allow me to, I would go ahead and move to 10 and 11, and then we'll actually close out the meeting out of the executive session. So with that, let's turn to section 10. Do we have any commissioner updates? All right. Do we have any other business we would like to discuss? All right. Now I'm going to read in two different sections for executive session. First, section 8. The commission anticipates that it will meet in executive session in accordance with General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A4, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, and General Law, Chapter 23K, 21A7, and 205 CMR 139.02 to discuss the use and deployment of security personnel or devices or strategies with respect thereto, specifically with regard to firearms security at MGM Springfield, and to discuss the response to the Commission's internal control related directive submitted to MGM Springfield related to the same subject matter. The public session of the Commission meeting will not, as mentioned, will, I'm going to say will not reconvene at the conclusion of the executive session. Do we have a motion and for that?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Brien,
Aye.
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner,
Aye.
Commissioner Broder,
Aye.
and I vote yes. All right. That's 5-0. With that, we also have some executive session minutes that Secretary Skinner has prepared with the team. The Commission anticipates that it will meet in executive session to review minutes from previous executive sessions, as their discussion at an open meeting may frustrate the intended purpose for which the executive sessions were convened pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A4, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, and General Law, Chapter 4, Section 726F. And the dates for those are July 24th, 2024, August 1st, 2024, August 29th, 2024, September 12th, 2024, and October 2nd, 2024.
I move that we go into executive session for the reasons just stated.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Brien,
Aye.
Commissioner Hill,
Aye.
Commissioner Skinner,
Aye.
and Commissioner Broder.
Aye.
And I vote yes. 5-0. Again, we will not reconvene at the end of these sessions. And so everyone enjoy your Thursday. And until next time.